long time ago, 30 years ago, and I thought, well, let me research it, and let's talk about an aspect of prosperity, but biblical prosperity. Everybody kind of likes the idea of being prosperous, but what I'd like to talk about is that it's more than just money. Because the idea of prosperous or flourishing means being successful in a variety of ways. It may be spiritually. Do you feel like, I'm prospering spiritually, I'm really growing, I'm on the right track? Or prospering emotionally. I'm getting myself and my want to and my fears and my hopes in line with what Christ would have me to be. How am I doing financially? Is that on track? How am I doing physically? Am I working on that? Mentally expanding and growing, domestically and relationally. When we think about prosperity, we think, okay, how's the dollar bills? The reality is it's so much more than that. And once we get that sense of there's a number of slices to this pie, this morning's lesson was challenging for me in what to leave out, because nobody's going to probably stay here for 2 days while I cover every verse there is. So I thought, okay, here's a handful of verses that cover some of the really significant things. So in the aspect of achieving prosperity, the first thing is to appreciate what we already have. You think, okay, I need these other 19 things that I've got on my list, and well, wait a minute, what have we already got? I like this picture of here's a father fishing with the daughter, and the daughter's got her fishing pole and whatnot, and just enjoying the time you have. Because older people appreciate, as you look back on your childhood, how long ago was that? Oh man, that was 2 snaps ago. I was 16, and then I was 6, and then I wasn't born. And just boom, it flies by. And it happens with your children, husbands, wives, appreciating what God has given us today. Sometimes people look at it and they compare themselves to somebody else of phenomenal wealth, and I just chose a handful. One of them, you have some of these TV evangelists, and they propose the gospel, the prosperity gospel. See, if you just send in enough money to these guys, you're going to be a billionaire. Creflo Dollar, I don't know if it's his real name or stage name, but he's a televangelist worth $27 million. Joel Osteen is worth $100 million. Kenneth Copeland, TV televangelist, is worth $760 million. Man, that's a lot of money, particularly when you think about where did it come from. It really came from the donations, whether they're selling their books or the money they're taking in and preaching or T-shirts or whatever they're selling. One of the televangelists of notoriety was Benny Hinn. And his nephew, true story, I read his own commentary on this whole movement, is named Costi, C-O-S-T-I, Costi Hinn. And he talks about how he grew up in this whole extreme affluence, and that they would go and hold these meetings like in Dubai, and they would stay at the best hotels and get the presidential suite. Now, probably you do this once or twice a year for yourself. $25,000 a night for a hotel room. Yes, sir. He said, would you do that? No, that's not where I would be at all. Costi, in this gospel of get ahead, he said, as a young man, as he'd go to college, he drove a $100,000 Escalade. As a college student, he wore a $10,000 watch. I thought, mine's I don't know, maybe I paid $50 for it, maybe $100, and it works and whatnot. But I don't go and say, hey, Vince, you checked out my watch? He goes, yeah, whatever. And so the reality is, it is so far beyond our experience. Well, the reality is, For us, Paul, is that where you want to be? That's not where I want to be. What's important is God and God's people, not, how much are your shoes worth. So the first thing in really achieving biblical prosperity is appreciating what we already have, the relationships in Christ, the things that God has blessed us around. If we're talking about biblical prosperity, another thing I'd like us to think about is seeking balance. That is, having a right view of this thing that we call prosperity. Interesting passage, and maybe most of us heard of it, in the book of 3 John, just before Revelation. 3 John, and there's only one chapter in verse 2. John says, "Beloved, I pray." So here is an apostle praying for a believer, "that in all respects you may prosper and be in good health." He said, I want to tell you how you're doing. I want your financial and physical flourishing to be in harmony with how great a job you're doing as a Christian. I hope you prosper like your soul is prospering. I hope you have as good health as your soul is having. So as we think about ourselves, what John says, I want you to be prospering in everything, including your soul, including your health, including finances, whatever they might be. But I've thought about this. As a young man, I thought I was in a position a couple of times could have made tons. By tons, what do you mean? Millions. And it's like God says, Paul, not for you. And there'd be some little corner I'd turn, and what I thought was going to end up with those monumental dollars didn't. The reality is, as we think about these things, there was a preacher a long time ago, Al Bass, was back in the Renton and Issaquah area, very well-to-do on his personal endeavors that he would have, his ranch and real estate and this and that. He said it takes a steady hand to carry a full cup. And so sometimes, how would your kids be if you just dumped $5 billion on them? That's probably not a good thing, because lots of money without spiritual growth is really a danger. Passages that we think about sometimes, Matthew 13 and verse 22, in the parable of the sower, he's going casting out seeds, and it fell in different areas and on good ground, on stony ground, and some of it fell among the weeds. And he says, the deceitfulness of riches choke the word. Oh, I'm just too busy. See, I got all my business meetings going, and I'm traveling, and what about God? Well, that's important, but I see right now is, and it's always something else. Or in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 8, how the love of money, interesting, that word for love right there is philos. It's my friend. That's just me and my bank account, me and my strong box. I just carry a lot around with me just because it makes me feel good. So what he's saying is, how are we growing spiritually? Are we able to handle that kind of wealth? Another thing for us to look at is not only to appreciate what we have, to see balance, but to live prosperously. One of the principles is to give generously. Proverbs chapter 11, verse 25, if you're taking notes, the generous man will be prosperous, and he who waters will himself be watered. A passage in talking about collecting money, as Paul was going around the Mediterranean world and collecting money for the poor saints in Jerusalem, he talked about some of the people that were really in tough times. In 2 Corinthians 8:1 and following, how the churches of Macedonia, in their abundance of joy. So as you think about yourself, are you a joyful Christian? Or are you, oh no, man, I'm just barely getting by, one day after another, crazy weather and crazy government. Or do you say, man, it is so good to belong to Christ. It is so good to have friends like this. It is so good to have spiritual goals. He said, in the abundance of their joy, but look at this, and their deep poverty, man, they were hammered, overflowed to the wealth of their liberality. He said, these people were really hammered, really in a crunch, but they said, we want to give. Think about the widow's mite. She didn't have much, but she gave what she had available. And so as you think about Luke 6 and down to verse 38, give and it'll be given to you, good measure, pressed down, shaken together. We want to get more in your basket. Running over, they will pour into your lap. And so as Christians, that's God's plan for us, to be generous, to give to others. And when we're stuck or this or that, people want to help in return. One person said, prosperity isn't just a state of possession, I got it and it's all mine, but an attitude of custody. That is, we aren't the owners ultimately, but they're the caretakers of what God has put into our possession. Ephesians 4:28, work, that is, with your hands, doing something honorable, to have something to share with those who are in need. Zig Ziglar said, a motivational speaker, he said, you'll get all you want in life if you help other people get all they want. That God didn't prosper you to go out and just get more stuff for yourself that ultimately isn't satisfying anyway. And so there are some people that are enormous givers. I've got a list of them that have given billions. And one of them that really caught my attention is a fellow named Charles Finney. I thought, who is that? So I researched him, and he's a retail magnate. He was the head of, you go into the airports and you have duty free, this and that. That's what he did. He set them up, I guess, all over the world. His lifetime, not how much he made, his lifetime donation was $6.5 billion that he's given away. His current net worth, he said, my goal is to give it all away. Oh, wow. His current net worth is still nice and tidy, $1.5 million. He's given away 4,000 times more to others than he has for himself. You go, that's inspirational. So when we think about what is our goal, well, some people say the individual holds on to dollar bills so tight, makes Washington gasp for air. And so what's our attitude in prosperity? God, you've blessed us, and I appreciate what we have right now. I want to have that right balance. I want to be generous about it. And think about it from the standpoint of fulfilling your mission. Here's a passage out of the Old Testament. Abraham wanted a wife for his son. He sends his servant Eleazar on a 500-mile journey. Go back to the family and find a good one. And Eleazar has 10 camels, and maybe had a number of other servants with him to protect and guard and take care of the animals and so forth. So he gets to the area where the family tree was and meets this young lady, and she's beautiful and working hard. And he prays and he said, God, help me find the right one. And if I find the right one, let it be that she says to me, if I ask for a drink of water, and she offers the water and will take care of my camels. And here's this gal comes out, and he meets her, greets her, she offers water to him and his camels. Now appreciate, these are camels, 10 camels. And so I try to think about it like nowadays, if you have 10 Escalades, 10 semi-trucks, we got to fill them up. Well, that's going to take quite a bit. And so Eleazar says to the family, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. And they called Rebekah and said, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. And so he recognizes, I got here safely, got to the right family, found the right person. And of course, how's the extended family feel? Well, somebody drives up with 10 Escalades or limousines and starts putting jewelry on and knows all the relatives. You say, wow, this is not an impoverished guy. And Eleazar said, the Lord has prospered my way. I thought about, and I was talking to Roger Eccles, who lost his wife recently, brother and preacher in Enumclaw, and I talked to him about this passage right here in Acts 13:36, how David, after he had served the purpose of God in his own generation, fell asleep. So my thought was, what's your purpose? Why are we here? I'm just putting in my time. But the reality is, we have a purpose on earth and for being in Christ. I like Matthew 22. If you begin in verse 37, Jesus was asked, what's the great law, right? And he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. You say, what's my purpose on earth? The first thing is I need to be devoted to God. Well, a full 10%. He said, are you devoted? Is everything about you? You say, God, you are my true North Star. And he says, of this is the great and foremost commandment. Of all the commandments are, here's number one. How am I doing with that? And then here's number two. The second's like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So how do we do that in reaching out to others? And I appreciate the theme that Vince has chosen about talking to others. Won't you tell it today? You think about your neighbors, people at work, individuals you bump into in the store, or whatever. Is there a way you can begin a conversation? Invite them to church. Have them over for coffee. You've got a mission, and you want to be prosperous in that. You want to be flourishing in fulfilling your mission. And then you think there's another element, and that is you prosper in difficult circumstances. No, I want to prosper so I don't have difficult circumstances. No, you may have difficult circumstances and be called to rise above them. In Genesis 39:23, Joseph of the Old Testament, he's got a great set of brothers, right? They sell him into slavery, get this whiner out of here. We'll make $30 out of it, and he got him out of our hair, and we'll lie to dad, and who's to know, and all such as that. He gets down there, he gets framed by Potiphar's wife, gets thrown in jail. So why not lick your wounds? Why not just stay there and whine and complain and say how bad life is? But he didn't do that. The chief jailer did not supervise anything under Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made to prosper. Man, that's exciting. Paul, isn't that how you'd be in jail? Man, I do not want to be in jail. That's what helped keep me at least as on track as I was, and I wasn't terribly on track when I was a middle teen. Man, I did not want to go to prison. And so sometimes we just need to show a good attitude in difficult circumstances. Paul, as he's in Philippi, converts the Philippian jailer in Acts chapter 16 and in verse 30. Later on, he ends up in Rome, and there he's, according to Philippians 4 and verse 22, how some of even Caesar's household, that is his family staff, I don't think it's his brother and such as that, but the individuals that is part of his whole regal routine, Paul's been converting them. And so when tough times come, do I still have a flourishing, prosperous attitude? You all have your own stories on that. I just came across this funny one that actually happened to me this past week. It really started back in June. They're putting in these walks for ADA wheelchair ramps all over the neighborhood. And as they got over to my neighborhood, and my house is on a hill, and they cut into my sprinkler system that was been part of the house when I bought it. I didn't put it in. But when it cut in the sprinkler system, man, that really messed things up. It got dirt not only into the pipes, there's valves around, it got dirt in there. They didn't know for months, didn't know why. They tried, couldn't get it to work. They'd cut through the electrical system that controlled the stuff, had to get a irrigation company out. We are now in mid-October, and it still doesn't work. I've got these road cones set around the edge of my property. Anyhow, fast forward to last week. Here's a couple of the company that did the work and cut into my system that still doesn't work. And there are a couple of young men. I don't know how old they are, maybe 26, 28, some nice guys. I liked them. And they were actually there to fix some other street problem out there. And I said, hey, how you doing? I said, hey, can we talk about the sprinkler? Oh, yeah, man, that's a bad deal. And I said, look, this and this and this happened. You guys did it. He said, we did. And I said, that's still not fixed. And one young guy said this. He said, you know what I do? Here's what I do. You call them up and swear at them. I I says, well, I'm a pastor, and that's not something I can do. What he said next really caught my attention. He said, do you have any family members that aren't Christians? And they can swear at them. It's like, I am not going to do that. You may get them to work or not, but that's not the kind of reputation you want to build. Oh, there's that swearing preacher from over in that area. And so you have difficult things. But we want to prosper in everything, including our attitude. We want to display the kind of disposition that Christ would have us to have. If we want to be prosperous, there's something else to consider. Though we want it to be prosperity in all areas of our life, not just financially. I like Psalm 1, and down in verse 2, it talks about the man whose delight is in the law of the Lord. Rather, God, here's what you say, and it really impacts my life. It means, for myself, Paul, you really had to make a major change from running the streets in Cleveland. And I thought, it took me 13 weeks to think about it. But I finally said, okay. You know, my fear was I didn't want them to, well, I had two fears. One fear is I didn't want the gang that I ran with to reject me, and I didn't want the believers to get me. And what do you mean get me? I didn't know what that meant, but I just felt like, boy, if they get me, then what am I going to do? And I hadn't thought it all out. I'd suck me up on a vacuum cleaner or something, I don't know. But until I finally said, wait a minute, I really believe in Jesus Christ, and he's got the answers, and I haven't been living them, I'm willing to reconsider. And so the psalmist says, and he will be like a tree firmly planted by the streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. Its leaf does not wither, and whatever he does, he prospers. We want to be prosperous in all areas of our life, in our families, our relationships, in our attitude, in our health, in our emotions, spirituality, in everything. And he said, that's how you do it. You pick out God's compass and see where true north is and start heading in that right direction. And the reality is, you know, life is tumultuous. And wealth, as well as almost everything else, is a changing situation. It can be fleeting. I saw this graphic here. It's like a giant piggy bank, and guys are breaking into it, and money's falling out all over the place. Ecclesiastes 7:14. In the day of prosperity, be happy. In the day of adversity, consider that God has made one as well as the other, so that man may not discover anything that'll be after him. Man, we know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, right? We don't even know that. God said, I have it this way so that you trust me, because you never know what's going to happen. Psalm 37:25, I have been young and now am I old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken or his seed begging bread. All day long he is gracious and lends, and his descendants are a blessing. You live the kind of life that tends to be an inspiration to the rest of your family. And they said, wow, that's how mom and dad did it. You know, I could do a little better than what I am. And so you really form role models for one another. And you've seen lots of people on the street corners, hi, why lie? I just want beer and a hamburger or something. And some, they bring their little kids out, and here's my problem. You know, I've never seen a Christian do that. I've never seen a Christian on the corner saying, hi, I am broke, I need a place to live. Why? Because ultimately, not only God will direct you, but Christians are going to watch out for you. I've just never, ever seen a Christian do that. James 4:14. You do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. Well, what's going to happen tomorrow? You step off a curb, somebody whacks you and you die. Or you might get an inheritance from Uncle Joe. Or we may go into worldwide depression. Or you might open up a wall and find $1 million. And the answer will be, who knows? You're just going to put your confidence in God, and whatever comes or goes. Peter himself, when he went into the temple in Acts chapter 3, here was a lame man, was asking for some help. Have you got, a long time ago, hey buddy, have you got a dime? Nothing costs a dime anymore. I go through a parking lot and somebody says, hey, you got a buck? How about $10? Well, that's just the way it is. But the reality is, if our attitude is things will go up, things will go down, I'm just not going to worry about it, that God's going to take care of me, and I'm going to do the best I can and not worry about the vicissitudes of life. And then, really, the last thing I wanted to share is the goal of prosperity is for honoring God and blessing others. It's just not so I want more stuff, God. I don't know about you, and of course, a difference in where you are in life and raising little kids or you're born in the senior years. My neighborhood, your neighborhood, you drive by and hear signs saying garage sales. You know what I tell myself anymore? I do not need more stuff that they don't want in their garage to bring it home and put it in my garage. Paul, don't even go there. And so Proverbs chapter 28:25, he who trusts in the Lord will prosper. God, you're my goal. You're what I want in my life. Proverbs 13:21, the adversity pursues the sinners, but the righteous will be rewarded and prosper. Another funny thing happened just 2 days ago, and Jim mentioned it, and I'm confident it's okay to share it. Jim Myers is driving a Ford Explorer, 1996. That car has been stolen twice in the last 30 days. And he got it back both times, same day. Let me tell you what happened most recently. The first one, they found it just a few blocks over in an apartment complex. They got it, and he got it back. And he got himself one of these locks, you put on your steering wheel. He got home, I guess it was Friday afternoon, was just going to come in for a little while, forgot to put it on, and they stole it a second time this Friday, just 2 days ago. And he called me, oh, Paul, they stole my car again. How did they steal your car? I don't know how they stole the car. I found out how they stole the car. But anyhow, I said, call the police, tell them what's going on. So he does. And a little while later, the police call, hey, we found your car. This time, true story, it's up in Des Moines. And about 214th, there's a Safeway on the west side of the street. And so Jim says, will you give me a ride up there? There's an officer has been waiting and will stay by the car till we get there. I go, wow. I wouldn't have thought they'd have done it. They said, okay, I found your car. Good luck. Maybe it'll be there when you get back. And so we get there, and here's a young guy. If you know Scott Beyer, it looks like a young Scott Beyer, he was young himself. It looked like a 21-year-old Scott Beyer. He's got all his police gear on, professional, really neat young man. And so I said, can I ask, how in the world did you find the car so fast? He says, what I do, he said, I scan the parking lot, Safeway, and I scan the license plate. I said, well, how many? I scan them all. I said, wow. And here was the car. I started, and they're kind of making their way around the parking lot, probably trying to get away from the cop. He said, it comes back stolen because Jim had reported it stolen. I said, wow. Except the driver of the vehicle pops out and leaves. It was a late girl, woman, whatever, named Vivian. And how do you know that? Because the two passengers she left there said, oh yeah, that's her name. And it was impressive to me because they took his walker, so he doesn't have his walker anymore, but they got all the stolen goods in there. So if you want a stolen laptop, if you want a stolen, they have lots of credit cards. I found one of them on the ground, handed it to the cop. They have stolen bank statements, all this stuff in a half a day. You know how they get in? And I just share this. I'm not encouraging you to be criminals, but I want you to know older cars, like between 1994 and 2000, as I looked in the car, I see all this junk around. I looked on the floorboard, and there was a bundle of keys on a key ring. And I pick them up. I just got my own here. And I showed them to the cop. I said, there's a bunch of keys here. He said, oh, look at that. They're shaved keys. What crooks do is they, on a rock or on a grinder, make them a little bit thinner, knock off the bumps, and kind of wiggle them around in the ignition that presumably don't have the little chip in there, and the locks pop open on Hondas and Saturns and Fords and blah, blah, blah. And so here's people. Oh, by the way, they had some food in there. And so Jim, if he wanted lunch, they had a little bag of food he had. No, not interested in that. They left all their stolen stuff that Jim and his son took back to the police station. And how does it work out for sinners? Oh, man, bad stuff. But the righteous will be rewarded with prosperity. So Jim, he's got his lock on his car. And God said, I'm going to watch out over you. I'm going to make things work good for you. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9 and verse 8, God is able to make all grace abound to you, that always having all sufficiency for everything, that you may have an abundance for every good deed. Our opportunity is, God, I want to honor you with what you're giving me as caretaker and to bless others. And the last point along that line is a neat scripture that I've appreciated for years, also from Proverbs, this time chapter 13, verse 22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. I think the thought there is, like years ago, you had bumper stickers on motorhomes. I'm spending my children's inheritance. Yeah, I'm going to use it all. Well, the attitude is, I want to use whatever God wants me to use. And I want to have a few dollars left over to go to my kids and maybe to their kids. Because that's the idea of prosperity. God, you've honored us and blessed us with a certain amount of wealth and health and emotional stability and spirituality and relationships. And God, I want to be a good caretaker, and I want to share that with others. We're going to sing a song this morning. It's called Ring Out the Message. And think about, that's another way you share the prosperity. You're sharing God's message with others. If anything, we could encourage you, help you. You need prayers, want to be baptized into Christ. However we could help you, we'd love to do that as we stand and sing this next song, 833. Ring Out the Message.